But also another strange thing was that I found that oftentimes it was women, certain women, not all women, not most women, but there were certain women in the organization that were just not kind to me. And when we did the research, what we realized was it's more than a glass ceiling. Really, these barriers are walls. They're invisible barriers that are all they surround us. Easy example is the boys club. He referred to me as young lady. When women limit their aspirations, it's for one of two reasons. Would that same thing be said of a man? Would anybody be commenting on a man's legs, right, in the context of an interview? No.
We've all heard of the glass ceiling, that invisible barrier at the top, but my guest today, Dr. Amy Diehl, argues the bigger issue is actually glass walls, the barriers that block women sideways, out of key rooms, roles, relationships, and opportunities long before we even get to the top. Amy is a researcher and the author of the book Glass Walls, and she breaks workplace gender bias into 6 core barriers. And the part I loved is this isn't just theory, it's research-backed, full of real examples, and comes with practical solutions. What leaders need to fix, what allies can do in real time, and what we can do as women so we don't internalize a system that was never even designed for us. Today's conversation is one I really want every woman in leadership to hear, because if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but still hitting invisible resistance, this episode is for you. Welcome to Loud and Lifted. Amy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm very excited about this conversation because I think we've all heard of glass ceilings, but you argue the bigger issue is glass walls, barriers that block women sideways, key rooms, roles, and relationships. So before we dig into the definition and what exactly a glass wall is, let's talk about you and how did you get here? How did you get to this point where you did research and wrote a book on glass walls?
Yeah, so I have a background in information technology. When I went to college, I studied computer science, and it was very male dominated, as it still is, unfortunately. I was one of only one or two women in my classes. So there would be like 20 to 30 people in the class, 28 men, one or two women. But I did well. I got all A's in college, and I really didn't know anything about gender barriers. I thought that was all behind us.
Right.
The women were equal. And as long as I was willing to do the work, I would get the same rewards as my male counterparts. Right. And I found that was largely true in college. Right. So then I go into the world of work. And I was very fortunate when I stepped into my first role in the workplace. And that was that I had an internship when I was in college. And then later that turned into a full-time job. And there's 2 different managers, but the managers of the department, it was a software development department, they were both women. And so I was very fortunate in that I was able to see myself, I wanted to be like them, because here they were an information technology leader. I thought, I see them doing it. I'm sure I can do it too, right?
Right.
That was sort of another signal to me that, hey, yeah, there are no barriers, that the world's an equal place. Then I go into my next role after that position, where I do have more of a male leadership, at least within the IT field, and again, more men than women in my department, and that's when I started to notice different things, strange things happening. It was also whenever I started to work my way up through the hierarchy. When I was at that first role, I was in the entry level position. So, one thing that we found through this research is that the higher that you move up, the stronger the barriers become. So sometimes you may not notice them when you're at the entry level,
Right.
or notice them as strongly. But regardless, when I started working then, in my second role and started moving up in leadership, that's whenever I really started to have these strange things that were happening to me that were not happening to my male counterparts. And so what I was doing was I was wanting to learn how to lead. And so to do that, I watched the men who were around me. I watched my colleagues and I tried to emulate them. For example, I tried to be authoritative with my leadership. Like if a decision needed to be made, okay, I'll make it. But what I found was that my male counterparts could make the decision and they would get no pushback. I would get pushback and I would lose points, lose respect from the male subordinates or from, my colleagues. And I thought, well, I must be doing something wrong.
Right.
And there were a few other things that happened. One of the things was that I was actually actively discouraged from joining the women's group at my workplace. And again, and at the time I didn't think anything of it. Again, kind of coming in from that mindset of, the world's an equal place. We don't need that anymore, like.
Oh,
And I think back on that. I did later join their group, but in the beginning, about how much more support I could have gotten if I had joined them earlier, an understanding of what was happening. But also another strange thing was that I found that oftentimes it was women, certain women, not all women, not most women, but there were certain women in the organization that were just not kind to me, just weren't nice. And at the time I was doing computer troubleshooting. And so I'm like, I'm just here to help you with your computer. I don't know why why am I
right.
sensing this hostility or something, Um, and again, it was only a handful of women, but it was just so unexpected because, you just come into a situation like that thinking we're women, we're, like we should be supporting each other. And that wasn't happening. So I took that all personally. I thought like I was doing something wrong. I must be leading wrong. I must be, my interpersonal interactions
Sure.
there must be something wrong. It was several years later when I started a PhD program that I guess I started at some point. I started to pick up on the idea that maybe it wasn't just me, and I started to also pick up on there are like women are experiencing barriers, and I wanted to really dig into that and figure out what barriers were women experiencing that men often weren't. So I started a PhD program. Throughout that program, I took the time to research, do as much literature review on barriers that were affecting women as I could. I did a dissertation where I interviewed 26 women leaders in higher education about their experiences with adversity and with professional barriers.
Hmm.
And I mean, that the whole PhD program dissertation research was just eye-opening. But from that, I went to a conference where I met my now co-author, Dr. Leanne Dubinsky, and we started talking, and we realized that we had very similar dissertation research on different populations of women.
Hmm.
I had looked at women and their challenges in higher education. She had looked at women in faith-based nonprofits.
Hmm.
And so it was qualitative research where we had done interviews. So we were able to put our research sets, our data sets together and like look at them holistically and pull out all of the barriers, all of the distinct barriers that we found women experiencing. And we also realized there was more similarities to what they were experiencing than there were differences,
Hmm.
which really led us to the conclusion that it wasn't so much the type of an organization or the industry that a woman worked in. It more had to do with we were women in leadership or women
Sure.
in fields that were not originally women's fields, or where women were, underrepresented in certain fields, that we were able to scientifically derive the 6 core barriers. What are the 6 core factors of this nebulous concept, this concept we think of as nebulous, being gender bias? And so we pulled those out. And the book Glass Walls comes from that research. So it's a scientifically research driven book where we talk about workplace gender bias, what makes up workplace gender bias, and we give lots of examples from everyday women, from women who are more prominent, as well as giving solutions. And we have solutions for women, or not just for women, solutions for everyone. So solutions for anyone who's a leader, solutions for anybody who's an ally in the workplace, and then solutions for the women themselves.
Great. And it's funny, as you're saying that, you're talking about higher ed. You were surprised to find somebody in a nonprofit having the same,
Yeah.
experience. And I'm sitting here shaking my head from a corporate standpoint that, yes, I mean, the higher I went up, the more challenging
Mhm.
it became and, had those same things in a corporate environment. So I agree. It doesn't matter your industry. We're all facing these same challenges. They just might show up a little different. So let's talk about the glass wall. We hear about glass ceilings and we kind of think we know that definition. What's your definition of the walls and how is it different than the ceiling?
Yeah, well, the ceiling is a concept that has been around for a long time, and I think it's a very, very real concept. And the idea of the glass ceiling is that that there's a certain level that women can rise to, and they have to break through in any industry or any given maybe organization. And if you think about the highest glass ceiling in the United States, it would be the U.S. presidency.
Hmm.
And that's one that's still there.
Yeah, still there.
We've seen women. We've had now 2 women candidates for president, neither of whom were successful. So that one is still, unfortunately, firmly intact. But so we think about that concept as you move up, it's higher and higher, you're going to break through the ceiling. Well, when we did the research, what we realized was it's more than a glass ceiling. Really, these barriers are walls. They're invisible barriers that are they surround us. So no matter which way a woman turns, she's running into something that she can't see. She doesn't know until she runs into it. That's something, that there's a barrier there, but it's there. And so we conceptualize the 6 core factors, the 6 core barriers of gender bias as glass walls. It's just a very powerful metaphor for what women are experiencing. It's more holistic than it's inclusive. It's additive to the glass ceiling metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you just said that, I'm visualizing that when you can't see, every time you turn around, you turn the corner, you're running into a barrier you didn't even know was there, and that's such a great visual, an unfortunate visual, but a great visual that you're like, oh, okay, I see why that's different. So let's dig into those 6 walls. What are they?
So the first one is male privilege, and we conceptualize male privilege as it's really the bedrock from which all of the other barriers flow. And it's this idea that workplaces were developed by men for men. In fact, institutions were developed by men for men, with men's needs in mind, without really considering what women may need if they were in the same roles in those institutions. And unfortunately, we have so many remnants of that type of environment today within our culture, within our workplace cultures. One easy example is the boys club, where you're in an organization and the conversations are revolving around topics that typically interest men, like sports or cars or drinking, or if the social activities, are typical, or things that are again more typically male oriented. Or even social activities being after hours, when it can be hard for somebody who has like caretaking responsibilities to attend, and maybe if they even want to attend, right? If it's even something that, like, golf is maybe one of the examples. There's nothing wrong with golf. I have nothing, no issue with the sport in and of itself, but when the men are making connections and making decisions out on the golf course without including women, that becomes a problem.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. In season 1, we had the founder of She Said Golf, who loves golf, but part of her thing was, from a business perspective, there's conversations, there's relationships being built, and women aren't there. So her whole goal was to get women more comfortable on a golf course, which ties into that perfectly.
Another example of male privilege is masculine language in the workplace. So if you think about the word, I wrote an article for Fast Company on the use of the word guys. And so I grew up in Pennsylvania, and in my area of Pennsylvania, the plural for you is you guys, right? And so I still have that habit today, which I has lessened, but I try to break, of saying you guys when it's a group of even when it's a group of all women or mixed gender group.
Sure.
So I wrote an article for Fast Company about how guys really isn't gender neutral, and that even if you as a speaker intended to be gender neutral, the person on the person who's in the member of the group may not receive it that way. But there's other types of like words, like if you think about some of the words that we use, like man hours. Right. I mean, we can change those words. It can be staff hours, right?
Yeah.
There's often easy words and some norms are changing, like it used to always be congressman or councilman, and you see some of those things changing to more gender neutral alternatives. But that's like one of the very subtle ways, that it's male. The men in the organization are privileged, when the women are kind of made invisible.
That's so true. And it becomes so used that you don't even realize it. And most people aren't doing it to be malicious or to exclude anyone.
Oh,
that's just how we've been raised, right? That's like the normal form of communication, but that goes back to the bias piece of it.
Yep, exactly. So go on to number 2 is disproportionate constraints. So what women often find in organizations is they're allowed in for sure, but their choices and their behaviors are constrained in comparison to the men in the organization. So one way that happens is that women's voices are often muted like literally muted. And that can occur by just being interrupted and overtalked in meetings. It can occur by, there's a term, we didn't coin this term, but there's a term that we highlight in the book called he-peating. And he-peating is when a man says something, when a woman says something in a meeting and it's ignored, and then a man says the same thing and everyone loves it, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Like I never heard that word, but definitely
Yeah.
heard that concept.
Yeah. I'm sure you've seen that
Oh, yes.
concept. Yeah. So that's another way that women's voices and their contributions are muted, even if unintentionally,
Right.
right? And then sometimes it is more intentional, where their ideas are just taken. We call it appropriating. If somebody actively takes their idea and, if a man takes the woman's idea and actively claims, credit for it.
Mm. Do you think some of that ties into, because we've talked about this in other episodes, like the delivery and the confidence? Like if you're not sitting in a meeting very confident, very, not even outspoken, but just, presence and delivery of your message is very confident. And sometimes women struggle with that. So is that part of that? Is just our delivery of messages?
Well, I would say yes and no. Certainly confidence is good for everyone to have, everyone to have, but, or display, I guess. But, the problem becomes for women, there's a fine line between, if a woman comes across as like too confident or overconfident, she's going to
Right.
get backlash and show. So that's why you often see women in settings where they'll use tentative language.
Yep.
Like, this is what I think this, or I believe this, where maybe the man next to her is just saying, this is it
This
as a
is it.
fact, because
Yep.
she knows that she may get pushback, if she
Right.
doesn't frame her words more tentatively.
Right.
And, I think the solution to that is that, everybody should be using tentative language when it makes sense and using the more confident language when it makes sense, right? Like for the man who gets away with speaking in an overconfident way, it'd be nice if he would say, well, I think this is what it is, when he's not sure, right?
Right.
Because there's nothing wrong with either communication style. It's just
Sure.
the fact that tend to think, well, this man is speaking confidently, so it must be correct. And we
Right.
just make that assumption, right?
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, in disproportionate constraints, another type of constraint is scrutiny, where women's behavior, their performance, and their dress and their appearance are scrutinized in ways above and beyond
Yes.
that of men. Right. We see that in certainly in women who are in the public eye. Thinking about the presidential candidates, one anecdote I have is when former Vice President Kamala Harris was running for president, the New York Times had an article about her dress, and in the article it had 4 pictures of her side by side, and she was in pantsuits. So she was like literally wearing the female alternative of the male suit, right?
Yeah.
And the sub headline was, "But does she look presidential?"
Oh my
Or is
gosh.
it, and like she's literally wearing
Right.
the female alternative to the male suit. And that's the question that the article posed, right? Just that's an example, of course, somebody who is very, very visible. But this kind of thing happens to women even in less visible,
Mhm.
positions. As soon as, and it can be used as an excuse, to not take the woman seriously, or to, dismiss her ideas, or, to not, give her that promotion. Well, whatever nitpicky thing.
Yep.
I recall when I was doing my dissertation research, I was interviewing a person who was a provost, the woman who was a provost at the time, and she gave me this story. She said, I served on the search committee one time, and we had a candidate who had wonderful credentials, and she interviewed very well. But there was a person on the search committee, and it was another woman, who said, but she wasn't wearing pantyhose. And so this woman that I was interviewing was like, I wasn't even looking at her leg. She's like, I was listening to her ideas, but she said, I was just so appalled, that somebody was calling out the fact that she wasn't wearing pantyhose. And that was
Oh my gosh.
the hard part about that, is when you bring something like that in a committee setting, it can like derail the whole, like, you put like kind of a negative idea, an unfair negative idea,
Sure.
but still you put that in somebody's mind, and that can be a reason to dismiss them from, or remove them from consideration for the
That's
for the
crazy.
role. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's such a scale, right? Like you hear people make comments if you're not attractive and
Mhm.
maybe you're overweight and you don't look the part, right? You don't have
Mhm.
the executive presence. That's their, excuse. She
Mhm.
doesn't have the executive presence for that. But then on the other end, if someone's too attractive, and it's like, oh, she thinks she's pretty. Oh, her shirt's low cut, or she wears whatever it is. Like it's like you can't be puberty, but you
Yep.
can't be not active. It's like you have to find this middle ground that's, quote, appropriate for and it's men and women. It's not just a
Yep.
man thing. To your point, I think women are quick to be super judgy of how somebody looks
Hmm.
physically, which is crazy. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
a big one
absolutely.
for
That's
sure.
we wrote an article also. It is in Fast Company about lookism bias.
Mm,
It gets to this exact point, and the point we make in the article is that like lookism as a concept has been defined as a beauty bias. So
hmm,
the idea being that attractive people get benefits and unattractive people don't. And there's certainly something to be said for
I'm
that,
sure.
but it really didn't. The concept really did not, before our article, did not separate out the differences between men and women.
Hmm,
And so what we found for women is that it's just what you said. It didn't matter whether they are considered unattractive or whether they were considered attractive. Either case was used as could be used as an excuse
yep.
to discount them or to not consider them, or whatever the
Interesting.
situation is. Yeah.
Yeah, men
Yeah.
do not get that amount of feedback that we
No.
do about how they show up
No,
and what their outfit
exactly.
looks like or how their
Yeah.
hair is.
Yeah. I'll go on to number 3 to keep us moving. Insufficient support. So this is the idea that women don't get as much support in the
Hmm,
workplace as men. And it includes things that we've heard of, like lack of mentoring, lack of having a sponsor. We talked a little bit earlier about it being excluded from unofficial social events,
hmm,
sometimes being excluded from formal events. And so all of this plays into that you don't have the support. So if you don't have the support, you can't move. It's hard to move up. And
right.
it's also one thing we found in the research is that we'll talk about harassment in a minute, but there was a study that compared workplace ostracism to workplace harassment in
Hmm,
terms of the turnover. And what it found was that women were actually more likely to stay if they had been harassed compared to if they had been ostracized.
oh,
And that seems like counterintuitive, but in some ways it makes sense in the sense, if you think about, well, if a woman is harassed, and especially if she's supported throughout that experience, or after that experience, like if the if she if there's an investigation, or if the person is talked to or whatever, like if she's got some support after being
hmm,
harassed, she's going to feel like, okay, this organization is backing me up, and I can move forward and think and hopefully know that that's not going to happen again. But if you're ostracized, you really just don't have any support. Like you don't have any, and
right.
so you just are really feeling
Makes
alone.
sense.
And and so that becomes the thing that's the higher likelihood of somebody leaving an organization. It's
Makes
very,
sense.
very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because the insufficient support, like, and this has come up throughout the first season, right? Like, it was the support professionally from a mentor and the exposure and
Hmm.
sponsors, but then it was also the support at home, right? Like having
Hmm.
that ability to be a mom, raise your kids, aging parents, whatever that cycle of your life that you're in. But people feel they're not supported, then they're not gonna. Oh, we can get into ambition.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
have that ability to continue to grow. You have to make
Hmm.
choices and priorities.
Yeah, and it's also extends into like organizational and public support. So,
Mm,
and what I mean by that is like organizations having good parental leave policies, good
yep,
sick leave policies, all the supports that we need so we can work and have you know
right,
kids or a family life or a personal life. By not providing those supports, it's really, I look at it and it's like it's just really so short-sighted, because we're doing harm to the overall economy, right?
absolutely,
And it's not harm that you can see, like, day in, day out. Maybe you think about day in, day out, but if you look at the aggregate and you have to like expand your mind a little bit to think about the things that we're missing. I
right,
think about it in terms of the things we're missing out on, if we don't have women and women's perspectives and women's ideas in the workplace. We don't even know what we're missing out on, in terms of innovations, of growth for
sure.
companies, of all kinds of things. So.
No, and everybody has this, debate over the work from home, work in an
Mhm.
office, hybrid, whatever it is. At the end of the day, it comes down to being flexible and
Mhm.
being able to, like, hey, I have to leave. My kid has a
Yeah.
show. I have a doctor's appointment, whatever it is. It's companies that lack flexibility, which is a lot of them, that just
Mhm.
get your work done. And that's what I would always say. I don't care
Yeah.
when you work, just get done what needs to be done and make sure you're there, for the team or whoever needs stuff.
Mhm.
But like we just get hung up on stuff that doesn't really make sense to get hung up on, like where you're physically working. Like, I don't care.
Yeah, and it's I think it's also there's a couple things there. It's like a relic to like people. Sometimes managers don't feel comfortable whenever they can't see their people.
Yep.
um, you know, but I would counter that with like we've always been distributed. When
Yep.
I've been working on university campuses, for example, and while the campus is within my campuses have been within a confined area, it's not like we're all in the same building,
Right.
right? Like we're in different buildings. Like we have to use email or whatever, or other tools
Sure.
to connect, the phone and stuff. So it's the same thing if my coworker is in another town or another
Right.
state, like you can still be connected.
Absolutely.
It's about learning good, how to be a good manager.
Yeah. And you can waste time in the office. I think back to
Oh
my early
yeah.
days when I was in office 5 days a week, and people would be in the office, say 50 or 60 hours, but they're, in somebody's cube. They went to lunch for 2 hours. They're scrolling on, well, it wasn't social media back then, but they're scrolling on the website, whatever it is. You can always be distracted and not do your job. It doesn't matter if your boss is right beside you.
So number 4 is devaluation. So devaluation is when women are made to seem as unimportant or less than. And I'll give you a couple examples. One is office housework. If you don't know what office housework is, that is doing like all of the non-career enhancing work, right? So it's things like taking notes in a meeting, cleaning the office refrigerator, planning the office party, ordering the catering, doing the meeting scheduling, and even it can be just helping a colleague with a project. Like you helping a colleague with their project, but you don't get credit for it.
Right.
That's another type of office housework. And so the thing about office housework is it's so important to keep the organization running smoothly, but it's often not recognized or rewarded. And women are also often under social pressure to volunteer for these tasks. Like a man can just say, I'm busy. Okay,
Right.
you're busy. A woman says, I'm busy. It's like, well, who are you? So that becomes the issue with office housework. And my solution to that is that you should reward, like either hire an administrative assistant type person who that's their job function, or reward it for the other people who are, the people in your organization, and make sure it's equally shared.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I've definitely seen that happen. And even we tried to create like a committee to be sort of like the team building committee, and it came into the catering, the orders, the events. I think once or twice there was a man on the committee, and I remember them not doing it. Like it's not their strength. That's okay. Let's figure out, something else that you can do. But like, let's just be honest and upfront about it. Like most of them are not going to do it. Not everybody, but most.
Yeah, for sure. Another type is something called benevolent sexism. And so we often think of sexism as like the hostile type, which is more overt. But benevolent sexism, it's when actions or words sound kind, but they're not. So it can be like comments on women's appearance, like, oh, she looks she looks pretty sitting over there, or like telling women to smile, which is actually a type of emotional labor. But it's also like not giving women opportunities in a seemingly benevolent attempt to protect them or protect their time. So like, let's say a woman has just had a child. Well, not giving her opportunity for promotion or for travel or for critical assignments without even asking her, without even like getting her opinions on it. So that happens far too often. I'll give you an example of devaluation, this kind of thing that happened to me. I was in a meeting at my workplace, and it's maybe a year or so ago. And there were 3 colleagues of mine, plus an older gentleman who was a vendor. He was an architect. He referred to me as young lady. And and he wasn't I could tell he wasn't trying to be unkind. He was trying to put me in like it was like a seemingly kind way, a seemingly nice way to try to put me in a place underneath him, like in the whatever hierarchy there was. But it comes across as kind, like it comes across sounding like it's kind. He's calling me young.
Right.
Like I don't fit in that, what I would consider the young category anymore, my actual age or whatever. Right. But I think in his mind, he was thinking, I don't know what he was thinking, but it's definitely a put down. Right. But it comes across as like you're saying something that it's seemingly kind, but it's not.
And I do wonder sometimes, because I had somebody we worked with he was in his 60s, I would say. And I think he was a little I guess, stereotypical, not putting women on the same level. And part
Mhm.
of it maybe was how he was, most of his
Mhm.
career. But he would call women who were in their 30s girls, and he'd call them something
Mm.
else. And I'm totally blanking. But I literally said to him, I'm saying, can you please stop referring to them as girls? Like,
Mhm.
they're in their 30s. Like, this is, and he's like, oh, and he didn't take it well, and he kept doing it anyway. But I'm
Mhm.
like, I just, I think his was intentional. I think sometimes it's intentional, sometimes they're
Uh-huh.
oblivious, but there's some who's just like, oh, well, you're not on the same level as me. So I'm
Yeah.
going to, put these labels on you.
Yeah, and you can sometimes tell if it's intentional or not because when
Yeah.
you do call it out and if you call it out and it's not intentional, often the person will be like, "Oh, like, I wasn't
Right. I'm so
thinking," and, like,
sorry.
and they'll try to, like,
Right.
do better,
Yeah.
versus taking it personally or getting, or just continuing,
Just
the
continuing.
behavior. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's a part of this category devaluation we talk about in the book. It's pet names and diminutives,
Mm.
and so in addition to girls, we found women still being called, like, sweetie or honey
Oh
or
gosh.
sweetheart, like just these little pet names that are often used in the home or in
Right.
like romantic relationships, but they're not appropriate for a
No.
professional relationship in the workplace yet. We found women reported, still getting that, hearing
Mm.
them.
Interesting.
Yeah. Number 5, hostility. So hostility is I would say that probably often it's because the most overt form and of bias, and it the goal of hostility is to keep women in their place,
Mm.
like to keep them in their supposed place underneath the men in the gender hierarchy. Because what you'll find, I think, is that often hostility, harassment, for example, of women can be much worse in the very male dominated fields, like the trades, for
Mm.
example, or fields that are just so heavily men. When the women are being harassed in those situations, they're being told, like, you don't belong here,
Oh,
and they're being told, like, your role is as a is to be in the home, to be whatever, but not to be in the workplace competing for the male jobs.
right. Or
I
certainly
just
have to
watched.
report to one. Mm.
Yeah, okay, and
That's
then
frustrating.
last we'll go to my last barrier, acquiescence. So acquiescence is as a result of all of the other barriers, women often acquiesce to their supposed place in the male normed culture. And this can be through things like self-silencing, like being silent, like not speaking up on behalf of other women or behalf of themselves if bias or sexism occurs to them. Also can happen is that they limit their own aspirations.
Mm.
And this when women limit their aspirations, it's for one of two reasons. One is because they've internalized all the other barriers and they really believe they aren't capable. Like, I'm not capable of being the whatever, whether it's the next level up in the hierarchy or doing something else. They believe they're not capable, and which we call a psychological glass ceiling. The other type is when women know they think they know they're capable, but they just don't want the hassles. They don't want the hassles of
Right.
moving up, right?
Yep.
They've seen what's happened to them. They've seen what's happened to other women, and they just are like, I'm going to stay where I'm at,
It's not
and
worth it.
save my emotional sanity, my mental and emotional
Hmm.
sanity, and my physical health too. We know that the stress also impacts physical health. So they're making whenever women limit their aspirations like that, they're making a very rational choice. Acquiescence sounds like, okay, this is like the things in this chapter often sound like, well, that's just the women's choice. Like the work life conflict is
Right.
one thing we talk about. Well, this woman is choosing to, she wants to stay home with the children and whatever. She's choosing that, or she's choosing a lower paying job. Well, it's a bigger. It's
Right.
like, first of all, the workplace isn't providing the supports, like good childcare that's affordable, where she could go to work. It's all a response, right,
Sure.
to everything else in the environment. It's not just a woman. It's usually not just a woman making a decision because this is really, really, really what I prefer. It's like, I'm making this decision because this is the way society is set up.
Yep.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. And it goes back to the whole McKinsey with their research about that women don't have the same ambition as men. And it's true, but it's not for the reasons that it's portrayed. It's just choices because you're fighting an uphill battle, you're stressed, you're
Mhm.
not sleeping, your anxiety's through the roof because you're in the situation where you're not supported and you don't have the infrastructure to be able to be successful. So, I think that's the challenge. And you're right. People are like, oh, well, they just choose to, focus on their family. Well, you can do both with the right support, but again, there's choices, there's sacrifices,
Mhm.
and, it's making that decision of how many sacrifices do you want to make, and do you want to deal with the higher up you go, right? Like people sort
Mhm.
of get into this mindset of, oh, I want to get promoted. I want to be a VP. I want to be a CEO
Mhm.
because it's more money. It's a bigger title. It's
Mhm.
power. But they they don't see all the stuff behind the curtain that you're dealing with, one, to get there, but then two, to stay there,
Mhm.
and what the sacrifices are that have to be made. And some do. And that's why they're like, I'm good. I just need to make a decent pay. I
Yeah.
want to, be able to support my family. I like to work. I'm motivated. I want to contribute. But, it's that give and take that I think women end up being more realistic about, because they realize what it takes, and it's not fun. So what's
Right.
it worth?
Right. And I think the point you're highlighting is so true. When you read the findings from McKinsey, which were that women, there was a gap, like overall in their report, it was 69% of early career women wanted a promotion versus 80% of their male peers. And at the
Mm,
senior level was 84% of women versus 92 of the percent of their male peers. Like that can be framed easily or too easily as, okay, like it's just the woman's choice. She's not
right.
ambitious. But it really is a response, like you're saying, it really is a response to all of the other societal lack of support
Yeah,
and the barriers that women face and that they
exactly.
know that they'll face. Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting close on our time, but these all six, I have lived it, breathed it, done it,
Mhm.
survived it, sometimes cried about it, whatever it is. And you mentioned that you talk about solutions. So
Mhm.
I know there are six that are very different. How do we move forward? Like, how as women do we overcome these gender biases I mean, I wish there was a magic wand, that'd be much
Yeah.
easier, but what's sort of like the approach to this to be able to move forward?
Yeah, well, first of all, the approach in the book is that we put the onus on leaders in
Mm,
organizations to fix the culture and to fix the environment and to be supportive of women and make sure that they've got equal pay and make sure that they've got all the same supports that their men have and make sure that that there's a fair playing field for the women. And so in the book, like I said, we have solutions for leaders, allies, and individual women. And we have a whole chapter for leaders where we have a what's called a gender equity and inclusion roadmap.
mm,
It's from level 0 to level 5. Level 0 is sticking your head in the mud as an organization and doing absolutely nothing, which most organizations aren't there. Level 1 is like compliance. Level 2 is doing ad hoc things.
mm,
And then it goes up to full inclusion and full equity and inclusion, which is it's an ideal point to get to. I will say, I don't think any company is,
sure.
actually at that point because it's just so unfortunately so infiltrated in our society.
Hmm.
But you can use this roadmap to see where is your organization on this continuum, and it gives you steps for like what you can do to get yourself, you know, up the roadmap
Improve.
that you're improve exactly. So we do that. We have that for leaders. Then we talk about steps for allies, which I'll summarize as really coming and being supportive of women.
Mm,
Speaking up for them on behalf of them. Like the quick example is if they're interrupted in a meeting, throwing the
mm,
conversation back to them. If they're being he-peated, stepping in and saying something like, "Hey, Maria just said that. Let's hear more about what she has to say."
right.
And then it also goes to, sometimes it can just be being confidant, a listening ear to women who are having who need someone to talk to and need support. It also can mean like identifying, like looking around, like thinking about the women in
Mm,
your workplace, and thinking about them in the same terms of as men. Like if you see your male counterpart has potential for that next promotion, well, think about what other women counterparts also
sure.
have, colleagues also have that same potential, right? And actively suggest them to leaders, or if you're on a search committee, speak out, and also actively look um, for bias and counter it. And by that I mean there's a simple test. It's called flip it to test it. And what you do is if you hear a criticism of a woman, like she's not wearing pantyhose, you think, would that same thing be said of a man? Would anybody be commenting on a man's
Right.
legs, right, in the context of an interview? No. So then that's like
Love
it's
that.
unfair, or like another one that's unfortunately maybe more common is we're not going to hire her or give her that promotion because she's going to have a baby or she might have a
Oh,
baby or
yep.
maybe call it maybe baby bias when you never say that about
Right.
about men. It doesn't matter if they're
Nope.
going to be a parent or or not. But then for women, okay, so because when it comes, we all want to know, like, what can we do,
Yep.
and while we don't put in the book, we don't put the onus on women to like rectify this entire problem. We do give strategies for women to help, to navigate the issue, certainly mitigate it, and to what we call it is taking charge of your own success. And so, the first thing is becoming aware of bias, learning as much as you can about it, learning to recognize it. That's kind of the point of the book, is that we pull all the different examples out so that when you're going through your workday or your career, if you run into something, you can say, I know what this is. And as soon as you can say, I know what this is, that can help you to not take it personally.
Sure.
Because like the next thing is like depersonalize. Like if it happens to you, know that it's not specific to you. It's not about you. It's about something unfortunately bigger, right? But it happens to all of us. Just being able to depersonalize can help you deal with it in a kind of more rational, like take the emotion out of it and help you come up with a logical, rational solution, and not have to feel like you don't have to feel ashamed or bad about yourself. This is something that happens to all of us, and it's not specific to you. Certainly building your support network, is another thing that we tell women to do. And then last, we say, make sure you have alternatives. I say always try to rectify like whatever the situation is in your own workplace, but if you keep running into barriers, you keep running into, like if it's toxic for sure, think about what your alternatives are. Can you get another job in the same organization, at a different organization? Can you go work for yourself? Can you go back to school? Like just have alternatives on the table, like you've even, that you've thought through, so that you don't have to feel stuck in one situation. Don't let that one job or that one boss like impact your sanity or your career.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's such great advice, because when you listen to those gender biases, and I'm sure anybody listens to this, like, yep, I've heard that happen to be in my situation, whatever it is, it can be really overwhelming. But I mean, if you boil it down for whether it's leadership or for a woman, like it's awareness, just being aware, having the conversations, talking about it, and then being intentional, to your point of whether you're in leadership, like, okay, what can we do? What can we change? I love the flipping it. Like, would you say it's about a man? And the same thing for women. So I love that it can feel so overwhelming. Like, oh my God, we're never going to fix this. It's never going to get better, but it's steps, and it's just making progress, is what all we can do. We can't, again, I joked about the magic wand. Unfortunately, I don't think that's happening anytime soon. So let's be aware, let's be intentional, let's have conversations, and let's support each other is what it comes down to. So when I think about it that way, it makes me feel better versus me like wanting to like go cry about the craziness of it. So Amy, this was so awesome. If people want to find your book or more information, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so you can go to my website. It's amy-diehl, Diehl.com, amy-diehl.com. So the ordering links for my book are on my website. It has just come out in, it has been out in hardback. It's now out in paperback. Audiobook is new too. Nice. And of course, it's available in ebook as well.
Awesome.
And all those order links are available on my website.
Perfect. And we'll put that all in the show notes too. We'll link to all that on the website. So Amy, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for doing this amazing research. And I can't wait to see the impact that we'll have for our world as we move forward. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Betsy.
I could talk about this for hours, because every single one of these glass walls, I've lived it. I've watched it happen. And I know so many of you listening have too. Here's what I hope you take away. If you've been running into invisible barriers at work, you're not imagining it, and you're not alone. Naming it matters, because the second you can say, I know what this is, you stop making it a character flaw. And I love that Amy doesn't put it all on women to fix ourselves. Yes, we can build support, stay aware, and keep options on the table, but leaders have to own culture, systems, pay equity, and opportunity. And allies, please hear this. Your voice really matters. If this episode hit, please share it with a friend, someone navigating these same dynamics. This is how we change the conversation. Until next time, stay loud and stay lifted.